This video is primarily about VST2 and VST3 plugins. What's the difference and which should you be using? However, along the way we'll look at some other plugin formats which you will probably have come across, and we'll look at a new plugin format which is creating a lot of interest for a variety of interesting reasons. There may be a little bit of technical information in all this, but I will try to keep it to a minimum and explain everything in as simple a fashion as what my English will allow. So VSTs. VST stands for Virtual Studio Technology, and it was developed by Steinberg back in 1996. Can you believe it? And it revolutionized the way we use computers. Without VSTs or similar technology, we would not have virtual instruments or effects, and we'd all have to spend a fortune on hardware. In 2008, Steinberg announced the VST3 format. And for the last probably 10 years, Steinberg has been threatening to stop support for VST2. We'll get into this in a moment. But before we get into all that, let's take a very quick look at some of the other plugin formats you may have come across. They all do a very similar job, although some may have a few features the other ones don't have. But by and large, they all work pretty much in a very similar way. Mac users will be aware of the AU plugin. This stands for Audio Unit, and it was developed, of course, by Apple, of course, for Apple products. And for a long time, the only plugins you could use on a Mac were AU plugins. Now, however, Macs support VST plugins. However, the AU format is very economical. It has a very low latency and integrates extremely well with the Apple Core. If you are a Logic or GarageBand user, you have no choice. You have to use AU plugins. However, if you are on a Mac, there may well be benefits to using AU plugins over any other format, mainly because of the close integration with the Apple system. The other format you may have come across is AAX. This stands for Avid Audio Extension, and it was developed by Avid for its Pro Tools software. It's only compatible with Pro Tools, and as far as I know, Pro Tools can only use AAX plugins. So that's that. On Windows systems, however, the VST plugin format is far and away the most popular, so that's what we're going to concentrate on. Now, if you want to produce and develop VST plugins, you need a license from Steinberg. It's a little money spinner, I suspect. However, in 2018, Steinberg announced that it would no longer give out licenses for the VST2 format. So from that time forward, any new developers, anyone who did not already have a VST2 license, could not develop VST2 plugins. Now, some sources, and yes, this is information I gleaned from rummaging around on the internet, some sources say that the licensing terms and conditions for VS2 were a little bit clunky, and Steinberg wanted to tidy them up. And they did this under the auspices of VST3. Now, VST2 went through a few versions. I think the most recent one, or the last one, is VST 2.4. So Steinberg could have upped the version number to VST3, keeping the same license, but these certain sources say it was an excuse for Steinberg to tighten up the license conditions. Now, I don't know how true that is or not. I'm just spreading rumours, perhaps. But I think it goes to show that in all endeavours, including our lovely synthesizer and electronic music community, there is a fair amount of politicking going on. Sort of brings us nicely to a new plugin format. It's called CLAP, which stands for Clever Audio Plugin, I believe. I have no idea who came up with this name. In the UK, certainly it is a very unfortunate choice of acronym. I suspect this will translate fairly well to other parts of the English-speaking world. They must have had one of Korg's 16-year-old marketing gurus on board when they came up with that one. Now, the format has been fleshed out, as it were, by Bitwig and Yuhi, so two pretty big names and well-respected names in the software development community. And the most exciting thing, I think, for developers is that Clap is open source. There are no licenses, no membership fees to pay. It is free, so if you want to develop a plugin without paying Steinberg any money, then Clap is the format to go for. Now, apparently there are a lot of developers interested in the new format. It is supported, of course, by Bitwig, and relatively recently Reaper came on board with support for it as well. Benefits include better multi-thread performance. Now, modern chips, as you quite possibly know, have multi-cores, so you might get an i7 chip, for example, with 8 cores or 16 cores or 24 cores. These are sort of like additional CPUs to give your system more power, so software can hive off different tasks to different cores to make them run faster and more efficiently. So that's one thing that the Clap format can do. It should also allow for faster plugin scans. You know, when you start up your DAW, for example, it scans your system for plugins. Clap format plugins should make that scan a lot faster. There is also support for per note modulation, which the development team calls MPE on steroids. So this is interesting, particularly for developers who don't have to pay any licensing fees. So if this takes off, and it will need a fair amount of support for it to actually take off, if it does, we might see a sort of plugin format wars develop. I can't see Steinberg supporting it in Cubase. I don't think they will be very happy. But to Steinberg's own VST plugins. The most obvious difference is that VST plugins have a .VST3 extension. VST2 plugins have a DLL extension. This stands for Dynamic Link Library, and it is a standard extension used by many bits of software. It's not just used for plugins. Now, normally this should not make any difference. However, I have been installing some plugins recently from a developer. I may make another video about this, but it put non-VST2 DLL files in VST2 directories. So when your DAW scans it, or at least when Cubase scanned it, it reported that this VST2 file was not a VST2 file at all, and it put it in the blacklist. Now, practically this has no adverse effect, but it means that your blacklist folder, or your blacklist list, is going to be full of these files, and it just makes troubleshooting a little bit more difficult. So bad on this company for doing that. They also put DLL files in the VST3 folder. Anyway, we should have no more problems like that with a genuine VST3 file, unless it's not a genuine VST file, of course. So what's the difference between VST2 and VST3? Well, the VST3 format supports a lot of additional features which can certainly increase the power of the plugin. For example, it can sort of go to sleep when there is no signal coming into it, which obviously saves processing power. Now, I think you can sort of do this with VST2s as well, but this offers a standardized way of doing it, I believe. It offers sample accurate automation, so adjusting parameters should be more precise. It also supports multiple dynamic inputs and outputs. What this means in English is that if you put it on a stereo channel, it will act as a stereo plugin. If you put it on a surround sound channel, it will act as a surround plugin. There is additional support for controlling the plugin with remote controllers. You can route audio into a VST3 plugin. I've no idea if that is at all possible in VST2, but it would certainly be of benefit to programs such as vocoders. And it has better support for MIDI events, which should put it in good stead when MIDI 2 eventually makes an appearance. It also has, I think, a definitive or definite or prescribed support for sidechaining, which is a good thing. Although I do believe many developers have incorporated sidechaining into other systems. One feature, which I was not consciously aware of, it supports the ability to resize windows. Hurrah! So if you have a large screen monitor, you can adjust the size of your plugin in order to best suit your requirements. Now, having said all that, be aware of this. This list of features is, I guess, guidelines only. There is no prescription for developers to incorporate all these features into their plugins. So if they don't want to, they don't have to, and they can still call it a VST3 plugin. In early days, many VST developers simply ported the functionality of the VST2 plugin to their VST3 plugins, so there was essentially no benefit to the user. Now, I don't know what the state of play is at the moment, but I would seriously imagine that developers are taking on board the additional features of VST3s and incorporating them into their plugins. At least that would make sense to me. One thing you may have noticed when installing a VST3 plugin is that the installer wants to put it in a very specific location. On the PC, that is Program Files, Common Files, VST3. And that location is specified in the VST3 specs. Now, there isn't a universally agreed location for installing VST2 plugins. Most installers want to put them into Program Files, Steinberg, VST plugins, or something like that. They can vary, so you end up with lots of different directories containing different sets of plugins which you have to incorporate into your DAW or whatever you are using to scan the plugins with. So it's a bit of a nightmare, and especially when you come to try to troubleshoot, you have to find out which directory specific plugins are in. So having one folder for all the plugins simplifies that enormously. Now, most installers do give you the option to select a different folder if you want to. Personally, I wouldn't. So that in brief is a quick look at the different types of plugins for audio systems and a slightly more in-depth look at the differences between VST2 and VST3 plugins. So which should you install? Well, given the choice, since development of new VST2 plugins is very likely to fizzle out and eventually stop, I would certainly go with VST3 every time. Now, if you don't have a VST3 plugin, then obviously use a VST2. In real world use, as they say, the average user for most plugins is just absolutely not going to be able to tell the difference between a VST2 and a VST3. However, the important point is that VST3s at the moment, at any rate, have continuing support, as well as a few nice additional features. Now, if you're wondering whether your DAW will stop supporting VST2s, well, it's a possibility, of course, but I can see no valid reason why a DAW should stop support for VST2, at least for many, many, many years. It's not the same situation as when DAWs stopped supporting 32-bit plugins. So I wouldn't have any fears or concerns about using VST2 if that's the only option. In time, I would guess that all plugins will be VST3. Or clap. So I hope this has been helpful in some small way when you next consider a plugin purchase. Does it support VST3 as well as VST2? And I hope it's given you a little bit of a broader understanding of the plugin formats and what they do. If you found this video useful and would like to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell, Thank you. I would be ever so grateful, and just clicking the big thumb would be a massive help as well. Thank you very much for that. And if you have enjoyed this video, I think you might enjoy these videos as well. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.